Hey everybody, it's Dave. So, as you know, it's a very exciting time of year. It's back to school time. Kiddos are going back to school. Teachers are going back to school. Administrators are doing what administrators do. And so Barry and I thought it would be appropriate to once again throw way back to the early days of the podcast, which is just a few years ago. And we wanted to share with you this episode, Strategies for Successful Transitions Back to School for Parents and Professionals. I remember this conversation actually like it was yesterday. We were talking about supporting transitions, back into school and setting everybody up for success. So really hope you'll enjoy this. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you've heard this one before, it's worth giving it another listen. Have a great school year, everybody, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. The primary purpose of Uniquely Human, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. Listeners should consult with professionals familiar with each individual or family for specific guidance.
Uniquely Human, the podcast, is produced by Elevated Studio. Music is graciously provided by Matt Savage of Savage Records.
Hi, I'm Dr. Barry Prezant, clinical scholar, researcher, and consultant on autism and neurodiversity, and a Brooklyn boy raised in the big city.
And I'm Dave. I'm none of those things, and I grew up on a farm in Illinois. But being on the spectrum myself, I have plenty of personal insight to lend.
And this is Uniquely Human, the podcast, a show that illuminates and celebrates autism and neurodiversity.
Believe it or not, it's back to school time. And actually, Barry, your title for this, I don't know if this is what Taylor will approve or not, but the title for this is OMG, school is just around the corner. It's that familiar feeling where it's like early August and you think, oh man, where did the summer go? And this is an important topic today that we're going to be sharing because not only is it back to school time, it's back to school time. I was going to say post-COVID, but now it seems like we're still mid-COVID. So,
yes.
Yeah, this. I'm hoping that you'll be able to share some wisdom with us here because I think there's a lot of parental anxiety, student anxiety, and in some cases, even the professional anxiety from the teachers and administrators when it comes to kiddos who maybe are twice exceptional, maybe have certain what we would call special needs, but I guess everybody's got their own needs. But just the exceptional students in the classroom. And, I think that anxiety kind of all feeds off each other. So what I'm hoping today is more of a marshaling of some of the best practices and some of your advice after, decades of helping individuals on the spectrum and educators and parents navigate what can be sort of tricky waters, which is the first, we'll say, 4, 6, 8 weeks of school.
Yes, and I kind of know this firsthand already. Yes, this is something that comes up and has come up for years in my consulting and in my career. But even now, as I begin to speak to some districts where I'm going to be doing a little bit of either training or presentations for, this is one of the issues they're bringing up right away. Okay, we're going back to school. Can we discuss, some of the strategies that work around that? Can we talk about what we're planning and get your feedback on that? And so we know that there are challenging factors just in general as far as transitioning. And part of it, especially when we talk to students with a diagnosis of autism, we'll talk about students with a diagnosis of autism. We know that transitions in general can be more challenging. And in a sense, I think we have to think of so many of our students as having more vulnerabilities. I think transitions are challenging for all people. But, what are some of those factors? Well, first of all, the beginning of school means you're going to be meeting new people. Mm-hmm. You might be going to new places. A very big transition might be if kids are starting in a totally new school or a school they've never been to before.
Or even a building at the same school. You're just going to the next building over. And
That's right.
It smells different. It's lit differently. It's newer. It's all that. Yeah.
Yeah, so many differences, and of course, this is one of the special challenges due to COVID, because for some kids, they're returning to even a school they were in the past, but it seems like a long time, or they weren't there full time; they were there partially remote, as well as in school. So the school, we know, is a busier environment. I sometimes refer, for some students, as the school being potentially one of the higher risk environments due to the sensory complexity, the social complexity, all the transitions within the day. So that could really be difficult. And when we talk about coming out of the summer, families establish their own routines and in the summertime. And this also means kind of modifying, dismantling those routines and starting new routines. And it's not just an issue, as we know, for a child or the student. It's an issue for the whole family. I think there's one other point that is particularly challenging. It's unfortunate, but it is common to hear, especially from older autistic individuals, autistic adults. Some have said this on our previous podcasts, that school was not a very positive experience for them. So if we're saying, hey, it's time to go back to school, and that student is thinking, oh yeah, you're talking about going to that place where I was stressed out so often? Yeah, I'm excited about that, really.
Yeah, that place where I'm targeted, that place where I open my mouth and everybody laughs and I haven't made a joke. That's really, even if it's not at the front of their mind, I know that stuff stays in the pocket for a long time, and your brain just kind of pulls it out in little doses.
And the range might be from, okay, well, school was somewhat challenging and it wasn't that much fun, but it was okay, to the other extreme of school was traumatic for me, or in the past.
Right.
And I was bullied. And there were all of these issues. Again, thank goodness these issues have been put on the front burner, and we've been coming up with ways to deal with issues such as bullying, but it still happens. So some of our students, kind of, to summarize, some of our kids have past negative memories, and we have to help dismantle those. But there are also special challenges due to COVID.
Right.
And we have to recognize that as well. We just spoke about the fact that some kids were in hybrid models, or possibly the parents, if given the choice, chose to have all remote school programming, or maybe the school made that choice, or the school system. So that's a big change, especially if we're trying to go back on a more intensive schedule. Wearing masks, kids with sensory issues, the unfamiliarity of that. How do people look? Can you see their smile? Can you see the teacher smile or not smile if he or she is wearing a mask? I think we have to recognize that everyone is a little bit more on edge. It's not just the students who are feeling like I'm coming back. It's the teachers as well.
Absolutely. And we just had a guest on, my gosh, who was it? Was it Carly, who was saying, she lip reads. That's her superpower. And
Yes.
if you're the teacher and you're wearing a mask, you've got a student who's not quite comprehending what you're saying if he or she can't read your mouth. You, the teacher, are going to be frustrated. The student's going to be frustrated, and this is not setting everybody up for success.
Yes. Yeah. And then, one last challenge we have to acknowledge is that in the past year or two, school scheduling has been very inconsistent. So how could you trust your routines? How could you even trust people who tell you, oh, well, in a few weeks, we're going to be coming back to school 5 days a week. And that starts. And then that's pulled back due to maybe an outbreak of COVID in the school.
Right.
So we say that consistency and predictability are two of the most important factors for people on the spectrum, and for all of us, and we've lived inconsistency and unpredictability for a few years already.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's I've got my two kids who are, they're doing relatively fine in terms of adapting, adjusting, but I don't even know how to tell them, like, yeah, we're probably going back to school, but now there's speculation that who knows, we might have to go back. So I don't even know what conversation to have with my kids at this point, other than, well, I know that you will be doing school of some sort, because I don't want to, I don't know what to do for truancy. Like, I don't know if they send me to jail or cut a finger off or something, but I don't want to be guilty of it.
I would be careful of that, Dave.
No, education, highly important. In fact, my whole family, half of my family are educators. The other half are farmers, and then we have a couple engineers sprinkled in and out. But the education discussion is so super important, and this is one that we haven't had to have before in our lifetime, with all of this unpredictability, and maybe you should wear a mask, maybe you shouldn't. We don't even know the answers to those. So so you've been doing this a while, and what have you seen? I guess we can just throw a dart and pick one of these topics, right? So, like, let's say increasing predictability, or even providing a foundation for emotional support, in the classroom, throughout the day, throughout the week. But in those critical first few weeks, let's focus there for a minute.
Sure.
What recommendations would you have, given these challenges that you've just expressed, for educators, for people, everybody?
Yeah, and I would actually say not only for the critical first few weeks, but for the critical first few months.
Okay.
Because we have to remember that, especially for more challenged people and kids on the spectrum, we would expect those patterns, those kind of familiar routines, to be understood, and it may take a longer period of time, especially for very, very young kids who've had very little experience in school, so they can't, pull from their memories of what school is like. So we're trying to establish an understanding, an internal model for these kids, that they understand, well, going to school is like this. This is what the schedule is like. Okay, you go 5 days a week, hopefully, and then you have a couple of days off.
Right.
So I always say settling in time for a lot of students that I've consulted to, and schools that I've consulted to, is not that couple of weeks. It's longer.
Okay.
So all of this comes under the general concept of transition planning. And, we could say, what's been in place? I think we have to understand that a lot of good programs, a lot of good quality programs, by definition, have good transition planning, possibly a team of professionals who help with transition planning in different ways in the classroom, if there are different kinds of related services and therapies in the school. What are we going to put into a child's plan to support the students coming back? And then one thing I think is very important is, if the school already has policies for transition planning, or a teacher has strategies, are the parents informed about that? And ideally, are the parents involved in planning? Anything from a child maybe bringing a favorite, especially for younger kids, favorite security objects; for older kids, favorite games to school, just so they come in with something that's familiar, and they begin to associate positive memories with going to school.
Absolutely. I definitely remember bringing, my mom would allow me to bring a couple trucks, like toy trucks, and occasionally a G.I. Joe figure, and that made all the difference for me, because it was just, I could check out for a minute, open up my desk, look at the truck, and then shut it, and then be back in the classroom. But you mentioned successful programs, and you mentioned having the parents involved in developing and informing the transition plan for an individual student. Two questions about that before we keep going through some of these. What when you say program, does that have to be like a big formalized legal structured thing, or when you say program, do you just mean like the third grade team at such and such elementary school? Second question is, besides parents and teachers, like what is that ideal team that would be informing the transition plan? Like who should be talking together to make sure that the child is being set up for a successful transition?
And to the first part of your question, does it have to be this big formal thing? In a student's IEP, as part of the accommodations in the IEP, there may be a discussion of, okay, how are we going to deal with transitions? What supports would be in place for transitions? Or it could be something that's relatively informal and even spontaneous, where maybe there's some communication between the teacher and the home, where the teacher says, oh, does your child have a favorite kind of comfort object or toy that he or she likes? And it's okay to bring that in. And in terms of the composition of the team, that really depends upon who's involved. It might be the student's IEP team, where they've already put some accommodations in place for transition planning. But it might be at a school level, where the administration in the school talks about, well, here are some of the special activities we're going to do to reorient all of the students to coming back to school.
Cool.
So it could happen at different levels for sure. Yeah. One of the great areas of concern that parents often express is who's going to be my child's teacher if that hasn't been decided at the end of the previous school year. What classroom? Will my child be fully included? Will my child be partially included? Will my child be in a substantially separate classroom based upon his or her needs, with maybe some inclusive opportunities, which we feel very strongly about? That continuum should be dipped into. That some kids will be able to be in mainstream classrooms, with periodic support or monitoring, all the way to some kids might be too overwhelmed by the sensory environment in a class of 20, 25 students. So that's highly individualized, and those decisions need to be made. But once again, I think that parents need to know about that. Parents need to have a say. They should legally have some input into that if it's part of a child's program planning. And that also begs the question of, well, what about last year? Which makes it a little bit more difficult with COVID and the impact of COVID. But ideally, what supports were in place previously that seemed to be helpful? If it's a new team that's receiving the student, has there been transition planning where the new team knows about those supports and really gets a lot of tips from some of the challenges and also what has worked in previous years? That's the handoff, in the relay race.
Yeah.
And the handoff is, here's all this information that we've learned. Ideally, if you want to go even more to the Mercedes-Benz, if you will, again, difficult given COVID, is members of the new team this year have had the chance to observe the student in their class previously. So they got to know them a little bit. So everything isn't starting from scratch at the beginning of the school year.
Not just a page of notes, but actually, I remember her. She was fun in the classroom. That was cool. That's great.
Yes, yeah, and also, what specific strategies, might be useful? What could be put into place? Once again, it depends upon the circumstance, the age of the student, but things such as going to the school before the school day and the school year actually begins. So kind of orientation visits, kind of settling in. And if you think this is just an issue for kids in elementary, middle, or high school, I'm a proud papa that my son has started medical school. at Duke this week, and yesterday was his first day of school, and it was many of the days this week are just orientation days, getting tours, having discussions about the routine. And interestingly, yesterday was a short day. It was 4 hours, and today will be a full day. So they're realizing what these students need, even at a college and a medical school level, to begin to transition slowly.
Absolutely.
So
like, you don't show up to a job day one and they say like, all right, get to work, you know. It's here's your desk. There's the bathroom. Just take it easy today, and tomorrow we'll introduce you. Yep, makes a lot of sense. And by the way, yes, there's orientation day, and yes, I would encourage people to not wait for the school supply drop-off day where there's 30 million families running around and the teacher's kind of frazzled to begin with because there's so much activity. If you can get in there the day before activity begins and it's a quiet place, that's a great adjustment.
And some schools do that. Some schools have a few days before the actual school year begins for kids who are thought of as being more vulnerable. So if they kind of go in, get a tour, maybe even get into their classroom and see the fun stuff that's in their classroom, especially for younger kids, it begins to develop positive anticipations about what school will be like. And that's important. When we have kind of anticipating positive things happening, we seek them out. If we either are totally unknowledgeable about what's going to happen, that uncertainty creates stress in and of itself. And if that's not possible, photographs, videos. I've been involved in situations where videos were made almost like a first-person account of, I'm walking up the steps into the new school. Oh, look, there's the principal, Mr. Jones. Hi, Mr. Jones.
Awesome. Yeah.
Because we know a lot of our kids are very strong visual processors. And if they can almost get a visual map of what to expect, short of actually going into the school, that could be very helpful.
Yeah, and I would add that I won't speak for all teachers who are listening to this, but I know of very few teachers who aren't completely committed to, developing the child that's in front of them. The teachers are unbelievably committed. Whether or not their administrators support them is a different story, but the teachers are doing the God's work there. And I would be shocked if there was a teacher out there who said, like, you know what, I would prefer you didn't come and take my picture if it'll help make my classroom easier for the first couple months. Keep going.
Again, just some other support. In our CERTS model, we would refer to these as transactional supports.
Right.
Using social stories, developed by our dear friend Carol Gray, who we interviewed on the podcast previously, to familiarize the students with any kind of changes they may experience, such as a teacher wearing a mask, social distancing. How will things be different?
Yeah.
And right now for younger kids, kids who might be more limited in processing of speech, lots of pictures, lots of visuals, so helpful. But I always like to recommend, don't just emphasize the differences, because differences cause anxiety. Emphasize what will be the same. So talk about if a child's going to a new school. Well, we played in a gym in our old school. Oh, we're going to play in a gym in our new school. And that provides a certain level of comfort if you know that there is some stability in your life by talking as much about what will be the same as what will be different.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, very important. As a matter of fact, I've been involved in situations where we actually developed books, and it was called My Old School, My New School. In my old school, there was so-and-so. In my new school, there will be this. I had a cafeteria in my old school. It looked like this. There's a cafeteria in my new school. It looks like this. And I've known situations where parents have said, when this was developed at the end of the previous school year, where parents have said their son or their daughter did not want to put the book down. Like all summer long, they just kept on reviewing it, almost as if to say, this will be helpful for me. I want to look at this over and over again.
How often in life do you get a user manual for a tricky social situation? Almost never. So
that's right.
I would have loved a book like that. I know my kids definitely would have would have been all over that sort of thing. And like you said, preservation of sameness. Would it be maybe even good advice if families have a summer schedule up on the fridge or hanging on the wall of today we mow the lawn, then we do this, that, using almost that same visual tool for this is what a school day is going to look like. And
Absolutely. I mean, to the extent that there could be consistent use of these strategies, the school using them, teachers using them, parents, caregivers using them, which means that the child's parents or caregivers need to get as much information as possible about the school routines and the school experiences.
Yep.
So it's not just, what I refer to as an expert model. Oh, the people in the school do all of this stuff. Now, some parents do it naturally. Some parents have a lot of experience raising a few kids in doing this. Other parents might hear of some of these strategies for the first time, such as a old school, new school book or use of photographs to preview what's coming up. And they say, this is brilliant, but maybe it just didn't come to them because they're not teachers and their child is young and they're doing the transition thing for the first time.
Sure.
I think another very important piece is the impact of our emotional experience. And now I'm talking about caregivers and parents.
Okay. Yeah.
That we want to talk positively about school. We want to talk about favorite activities, maybe favorite people who are going to be in the school. Not just words, using pictures, using songs. We want to once again establish anticipation for experiencing the positive aspects of school. And, this is one of those things that we have to recognize that parents and caregivers are going to be anxious, but where we have to really be very self-aware enough that any anxiety we are feeling can be felt by the child and can be spilled over. So
yes. And let's not forget that we're talking about school. The school day for so many kids starts on the bus.
Oh my goodness.
So
Yes.
Start at the bus line all the way until when they come back home. That's the school day.
I will move you earlier than that, Dave.
Oh,
In a sense, if we want a child, even an older student, to come into school well-regulated, ready to learn, ready to focus, the school day starts from when the child wakes up.
absolutely.
I mean, how many times have you had a rough morning at home when I've had a rough morning at home, and then you try to get into your focused work mode, and that still is reverberating in your mind.
Yes. My wife, who scored an 8 on an autism evaluation out of like 200 points, she just posted this on Instagram the other day. She has a non-negotiable morning routine. Usually starts around 5 or 6 a.m. and we are not allowed to touch it. And she's as neurotypical as they come.
Yes, and I think we might have actually shared this on a previous podcast. There's research to indicate that the morning routine for human beings is probably the most important part of the day for being well-regulated for the rest of the day.
Agree. And by the way, I feel validated for my 3-hour morning routine.
Right. But if we get out of bed stumbling, especially sleep deprived, but our morning routine is changed. Some people would kill if you try to take their cup of coffee away in the first half hour of waking up.
Absolutely.
I don't really mean kill, you know that, but
I've seen it happen. No, you're right. You're right. It's set yourself up for success by not just waking up, messy bedhead, quick, get out the door, get on the bus. It's like you need to orient yourself in your day and then allow school to come into your day. You're saying don't stumble in with Mountain Dew in your hand and like, oh gosh.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, the being well regulated going onto the school bus is important because the school bus can be dysregulating.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And by the way, we could talk about strategies for that, about having some favorite music, having something to do, make sure a child is not seated, in an area of the bus if he doesn't like the back of the bus, the front of the bus. Maybe he or she, if there's extra room on the bus, needs some alone time.
Yeah.
I once consulted to a student who just being around noisy kids, and you couldn't ask everybody just to not speak at the end of the school day, that was dysregulating for him going home. So it was decided, well, there were some empty seats, so let him have this space in his alone time to listen to music going home.
And if kids aren't respecting that, Barry and I will be selling shirts that say, "I've got COVID," all sizes, and they can wear this on the bus and they'll get plenty of space.
I think we have to mark some of these recommendations with "just kidding."
Yeah. And basically, anything that comes out of my mouth, people should flush right down the toilet. You should be listening to Barry, not me. Keep going. This is good.
Yeah.
This is really, really helpful stuff.
Yeah. So then getting back to the routines at home, it's not just a matter of having a good routine in the morning. So let me just tell you a quick story. A number of years ago, I was meeting with a group of parents in a school district that I consulted to, and it was just a chat. It was a small group of parents, and I think it was mostly moms. 1 or 2 dads dropped in. And I basically said, as I often do, put on the table what you want to talk about, because my presence here is not relevant unless we talk about what's your concerns, So one mom said, "Oh, the morning is so crazy and I feel so badly. Sometimes I send my son who's on the spectrum off to school. He's already dysregulated. I know it's going to be tough for him to settle in." And one of the other moms said, well, why? Why is it so hectic? And she said, "Well, I have 3 kids I need to get off to school, and one of them is on the spectrum. And there's just not enough time to do everything." And the other mom said, "How about waking up 20 or 30 minutes earlier?" And the mom who expressed the concern said, "That's a great idea. I didn't even think about that."
Exactly. Yeah.
So again, sometimes at moments of stress or when we feel surrounded by a stressful circumstance, something that may be very obvious to other people just doesn't come to mind.
Sure.
So think about the importance of the morning routine. That also includes nutrition. I've consulted to programs where it was uncertain whether a child had breakfast or not, and they didn't know whether the child's dysregulation was, especially for kids with more limited communication abilities, they didn't know whether it was that lack of that. Whereas other programs had a little checklist where mom or dad or caregiver checked off, "This is what my son or daughter had for breakfast. He probably won't be that hungry this morning," as opposed to, "He didn't eat much for breakfast. He'll probably need some snacks," something along those lines.
So again, it can be as detailed as you want. What about when you come home from school, though? Like, what about after the school? That's a big time for my kids where they just need to be alone for a minute.
Absolutely. It's so important to schedule regulating time and regulating activities after school. Again, how many times have I heard, "Barry, what do we do? My son comes home from school and he's like a ping pong ball bouncing off the walls."
Yeah.
Or, my daughter is just kind of running on fumes because she holds it together, puts so much energy into holding it together in school. Think about what we often do after a difficult workday. So the whole idea is, what is regulating? For one child, it might be walking the dog, or maybe it's a walk with that student and his or her dog. Maybe alone time. Maybe it's listening to music. Maybe it's outdoor play. What is so important here is understanding that the school day in and of itself can be tough, especially at this time of establishing new routines and really working with the school staff to come up with a regulation plan. And we've discussed this in general terms in previous podcasts, which includes what happens in the morning, transitions to school, what happens after school, transitioning back to home. Very important.
Absolutely. So yeah. I'm wondering from the teacher's perspective, if I'm the teacher, what would you tell me, or what advice would you give me to help with all of this?
Yeah,
because that's a skill that I can't even begin to touch.
Yes,
managing a classroom.
And some teachers are naturals at knowing how to put in supports for regulation, because that's so much of what we're talking about here. Some teachers are supported, extremely well supported by a team with, people who could help to make visual, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, school psychologists, behavior therapists with the appropriate training. So there are so many approaches and strategies that could be used, such as, and by the way, whenever possible, again, this should be shared with the parents. The actual supports, maybe duplicates of the supports, such as visuals, or at least the parents being aware. So transition stories, visual supports. The transition stories can be social stories. As we spoke about earlier, visuals, photos of the school, photos of activities, photos of sections of the classroom. For students, of course, who benefit from augmentative alternative communication. Very, very important.
Yes.
Whether it's low tech, whether it's high tech approaches, which also can include other supports such as visual or written schedules, checkoff systems to indicate, okay, well, we're done with this. This is coming next. First, next, now, then. Supports all of this, increases predictability. Very important.
Absolutely. Like I've never given a presentation to an executive that didn't have a index on every slide saying, okay, now we're going to talk about fourth quarter revenue. Like everybody needs this from a regulation standpoint.
Absolutely. But we still, unfortunately, without thinking too carefully about it, sometimes we go back to just trying to explain so much in words, without ways to support the processing strengths of our kids, which very often has to do with visual. But let's also talk about another important area, and that's the whole notion of movement, exercise. It's hard to stay well regulated when you're challenged by sitting still in a chair. Okay.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's impossible. If you're listening to some good music and you're kind of rocking back and forth in that chair, or you have a rocking chair, that might help.
Yeah.
But especially for younger kids, lots of movement activities as we transition kids back. The use of music, oral sensory support. Some kids benefit greatly from crunchy, healthy snacks, that the child doesn't have to earn the snacks, or the child doesn't have to wait long periods of time.
I've even seen. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've even seen chewy tubes where it's just something to nosh on that isn't gum. That's been very effective as well.
Exactly. You go to an OT catalog. There are all kinds of chewies that are available. For older kids, I've consulted to programs where if there's an activity that might be a little bit more stressful and the student needs more regulatory supports, they can ask for gum and to chew gum. And it's not seen as candy. It's seen as a support for regulation due to the oral sensory input.
Yeah.
Let's shift a little bit. What about older individuals a little bit more sophisticated cognitively in their language processing? They may need times to talk, kind of support groups to talk about coming back to school. What are the difficulties? What are the strategies? High school, I've consulted to middle schools and high schools where there were always opportunities, even for kids fully included, to get together with other kids with similar needs as a way of kind of, in some cases venting some of the challenges and difficulties, in other cases seeking recommendations, seeking support, knowing you're not the only one who's having some of these challenges or difficulties.
Yeah.
And let me give you a quick example of that. I think I've been involved by Zoom in our local New England Miracle Project program, where we have teens and adults on the spectrum. And they very often support each other. Very often there are spontaneous comments. When school is starting again, do you think we're going to go back 5 days a week? Or I didn't like it when I only went in Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so that almost became like, when there was time, a little bit of a natural support opportunity.
Yeah.
But
you're creating the environment for that to happen on its own.
Absolutely. And that could, and by the way, I don't mean to imply that should not happen with people who are non-speaking. It should happen with people who are non-speaking, obviously.
Sure.
Who use spelling boards, who use high-tech devices, because they need to be heard and probably need a little bit more time in moving from their thoughts and their feelings to communicating to other people what's going on. So that's very important.
Absolutely.
And a related piece is, just saying to a student who's having difficulty, just get over it, which has come up a number of times in previous podcasts, is not going to work. If a person is feeling those strong feelings, that anxiety, that concern, that confusion, we need to acknowledge that. We need to discuss it, maybe make special times for that. We have to read the signals of dysregulation and be flexible in providing the supports in place.
We're talking about a lot to set up the success of the student, but also the classroom in general.
Yes.
At a certain point, don't we need the students to just be able to be on board? I mean, that's oversimplification, but I'm a product of a public school system that really didn't care that I had differences. And it was just, you will sit in that chair for 45 minutes, even if you're upset about something. And is there some middle ground there? Or how do we address that? And maybe that's a different episode altogether.
There's one quote that I've actually heard you repeat from our dear friend Ross Blackburn. Can I cue you up for that?
Share it with us.
Have high expectations for autistic people and autistic children, but with appropriate and, when necessary, high levels of support.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not that we're not going to increase expectations, that we're not going to increase what is clearly a bit more challenging over time, but the supports need to be in place for that.
Sure.
We don't want kids to think that school is a sink or swim event.
Aha, like it was when I was there.
Yeah. So we're not going to get into your feelings about school now, but
I loved it. I loved school. I find adulthood to be far more difficult than school.
Then I would assume that there were people who provided the right kinds of supports that worked for you, even though you knew that you were being challenged.
Absolutely. I had amazing people. Yep.
Yeah, so I think just some general comments to sum up our discussion. And I think this cuts across all grade levels, all ages. And that is, let's try to create positive emotional memories about going back. That we know that kids learn best when they're well-regulated, comfortable, and secure. And they re-engage and connect with others more easily. So let's introduce fun activities at the beginning of school. And fun, predictable. Let's try to create positive emotional tones by the way we talk, by the way we do activities. Expect that our kids are going to need more breaks. That's just a given. And that's just an essential part of good school programming for all kids, but kids on the spectrum in particular. Infuse favorite activities. Let's ask parents, what are your kids' favorite activities? Can they bring things in, especially in the early days of school, that is focused on their interests and their strengths?
And it can be super easy. I was allowed to draw on the back of my quiz because I'd finished my tests and quiz like 10 minutes before everybody else. And every day I would ask, teacher, can I draw on the back? Yes. They would just let me draw on the back. It was that simple, but it kept me really grounded.
There you go. Right there. Yep. Early on, let's understand if we're ramping up the demands a little too much, it's okay to back off. We don't want our kids to feel like, oh my God, there's a tsunami of information and learning that I have to deal with right now.
Yeah.
However, there is this compulsion to catch up. I mean, you just keep on hearing now, just on the news this past week, about how far kids have fallen behind in general. And now it's spoken about slightly differently, I think, in the autism culture. How many skills has my child lost?
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And if we really kind of push to try to catch up, yes, that's important, but always reading a child's signals of regulation and dysregulation. Are we pushing too quickly? Let's not increase stress level. It's a tough dance. You're dancing along that fence right there because we want the best for our kids, but we don't want to stress them out as we want the best learning to occur as well.
Yeah, slow is controlled and controlled is fast.
Right. Yeah. And one last point is let's not always feel we have to reinvent the wheel. For a lot of our students, for a lot of teams who work in schools, strategies that have worked in the past.
Right.
Not uncommon for me to go into a school, even pre-COVID, where a student's having more difficulty, and I'll say, well, what strategies have worked in the past? And the team would come up with 2 or 3 things they used to do and say, we don't really do that anymore because he didn't really need that anymore. Did it work? Did it work? Absolutely. Let's bring them back. It's important. Yeah.
I stopped meditating because I felt better. It's like,
that's right.
Yes, totally. Yep.
Now I'm stressed out. Why are you stressed out? Well, I don't meditate anymore. Yeah.
Right.
By the way, that's a whole other area that could be very, very helpful, and that's mindfulness activities.
100%.
Yoga, meditation. There are actually a number of people on the spectrum I know, and I'm planning to invite one onto our podcast, who teaches meditation, and another person who teaches yoga for students on the spectrum.
The most powerful non-pharmacological answer to some of these situations, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. Absolutely. So we want our students to see school as a positive experience, but let me flip to the parents and caregivers.
Yeah.
We want them to see school as a place that really supports their efforts.
Absolutely.
And helping their kids. So it goes both ways. I mean, we want kids to have positive emotional memories of school. We want parents to have positive, not only memories, but ongoing experiences that, they really are there for me. That team in the school, I just make a call and they call me back and I mentioned this support and they said, oh, sure, we'll send one home next week. And I'm lucky enough to consult to some districts where I see so many happy parents.
Amazing.
And I think it's because of that reciprocity of support that's so important. So that's about it. I know I've spilled out a lot.
What else you got?
But I guess I do have one other thing. Especially for students who can share from their own experiences, we should always be asking, what has been helpful to you? What do you think would help you in this circumstance? If they're capable of reflecting on past experiences and communicating that, or even pointing to choices that might be helpful. That's called building self-determination and self-awareness.
Isn't that funny? I asked you that question a few minutes ago about who should be involved in the transition. And I don't know why it didn't even occur to me that the student themselves, it's just now occurring to me, should be part of that conversation too, if appropriate.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the way we're going. I mean, we're talking about, the highest level of programming, even starting with very, very young kids, is helping them develop self-awareness. Yeah. What do I like? What's hard for me? What's easy for me? What supports are helpful? Which people do I like? Which people do I want to kind of keep away from because
Right.
They cause more stress for me, and so forth. And of course, if that's the case, then we have to work on that person's style and their approach as well. So Sure. Yeah.
Wow. This is, there's so much we could get into. There's even how do you coach your kids when when other kids' bad behavior causes them to have anxiety, not influences them, but there's so many things that can cause anxiety that you wouldn't think of unless you were that person. But yes. I think this is an important conversation of hopefully many that we'll have throughout the upcoming school year. So when people have questions, they should absolutely write into us. And if you're listening to this and something specific hits you, write it in and we'll see if we can talk about it.
Great. We'd like to take a moment to thank you for listening to Uniquely Human, the podcast. It is so gratifying to hear that so many of you find value in what we share.
It is gratifying, and it's so much fun making this show together, Barry. Mm-hmm. Being able to meet with you every week and all the guests and listener support that we've received, it's such a joy to make this show. And of course, we are commercial free, But Barry and I would invite you to support this show in a number of different ways. That could be buying our books or even inviting us to speak live or virtually to your organization or to your community. Mm-hmm. To learn more about all of this, you can, of course, go to our websites, barrypresent.com or davidjfinch.com, to learn more about our speaking topics and how to work with us and all of the consultative services that we provide.
And we also want to know how we're doing. We are in a constant quality improvement mode here.
Yes.
So please make sure to leave comments and ratings, suggestions on social media. Contact us directly on the links on our website and recommend Uniquely Human, the podcast, to those in your lives. In conclusion, we are so grateful to you, our Uniquely Human community, for your support and loyalty, and we'll be keeping at it.
Yes, thank you all so much. Now back to the show. Let's bring in our enthusiasm of the week. And then if there's final wrap-up statements you wanted to make, we can do that after the enthusiasm.
Sounds good. And actually,
right.
our enthusiasm, I think, connects nicely to some of the things we discussed.
I think so, too. In fact, this one has a special place for me because I believe there's humor involved. Let's see.
Yes.
So we're bringing in Danielle Rivenbark to the show here.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
We're good.
Good. How you doing?
How you doing? You want to tell them hi?
Hi,
Hey, buddy. What's your name?
my name is Gardner.
All
Hey.
right, Gardner.
Hey, Gardner, I'm Barry.
Can you say hi, Dr.
Hi, Dr. Barry.
I'm Dave.
Can you say hi, Dr. Dave?
Hi, Mr. Dave.
Well, thank you so much for waiting patiently. And we were just discussing sort of successful transitions into the school year, supporting that success. And Barry was just so much wisdom here. And then this is going to be so much fun, too, to talk to you and Gardner because this is something near and dear to my heart, which I understand is humor. Is that right, Barry?
That is correct. And if I might, Danielle, I'm going to read what you sent to us, which motivated us to invite you and Gardner to be on. Okay?
Sounds good.
So Danielle wrote this to us. My son Gardner, who's 6, loves to tell jokes to his classmates. Since we've been remote learning on and off this year, I've tried to manage his enthusiasm, thinking that it was disruptive to the teaching and learning. However, I overheard his classmates and teacher ask him to tell them a new joke, and he was beyond excited. It wasn't until this moment that I realized this was a great way for him to connect with other people in his own way. Your podcast gave me a word for what he was sharing, and that's enthusiasm. So thank you. Well, thank you. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that? And then maybe Gardner can share some of his talents.
Yeah. So we started virtual learning last year, like so many school districts. And I got to tell you, those first few weeks were like head in the pillow. Like, I'm not going to do it. It was new. He just wasn't having any of it. But there was this show he watched that had a robot who told jokes, and he just latched onto it. And my husband and I thought it was so funny that, like, of course, given the pander and the how his voice is, that he would latch onto a robot as an imitation, which we thought was just, of course he did. And then he just started getting to know his classmates a little bit, as much as you can for an hour on virtual school every day. Mm-hmm. And he started sharing his jokes and, training kids in general to when to mute and just extra challenges with virtual school. But it turns out that they all wanted to hear his jokes so much that his Nana got him a joke book for Christmas. And
Great.
He finds it so much that he can connect with people because it's scripted. And I know y'all have talked about being scripted and having all those scripts in your brain of, if this happens, I can say this. And sometimes I find myself trying to decipher what he wants from a script that he's pulling from that dictates his emotions. So I kind of have to know his scripts too. But his friends started telling jokes also. And then they started making up his own jokes, and that kind of went downhill fast.
That could happen sometimes. It's the hero's journey in comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. But his friends loved it, and he was able to connect with them in that way. And so, as much as I was like, no, this is not time for jokes, but his teacher was so kind to allow him, and she saw that it helped him so much get friends. And then they went back face to face. Of course, that helped a lot more with him. But yeah, he loves telling jokes to people.
Yes. And you know what I love about this, that jokes by their very nature have to do with positive emotion and laughing.
Yeah.
And so it's interaction, but it's interaction around shared positive emotion. And that's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if Gardner wants to, we would love to hear some jokes, Gardner.
Gardner, would you like to tell a couple of jokes?
Sure. Probably like 5 kind of quick.
5 quick jokes. Is that okay?
That's
Perfect.
fine. That's
Just
good.
like Rodney Dangerfield.
Okay. Why did Cookie go to the doctor?
Why?
Because he was really crummy.
Those cookies, because it was really crummy.
Why did the teddy bear say no to dessert?
Why did the teddy bear say no to dessert?
Because he was stuffed.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, go ahead. Next one.
These are great.
What did the popsicle say to the other popsicle?
What did the popsicle say to the other popsicle?
What?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
What do you get when you cross a vampire with a snowman?
What do you get when you cross a vampire with a snowman?
What?
You get frostbite.
These are great.
Last one.
And one more.
Okay.
What did baby corn say to mama corn?
What did baby corn say to mama corn?
What?
Where is popcorn?
Oh my goodness.
Gardner, you've got it. These are you've really got a strong delivery, and that's a good thing. Like you can't just shyly tell a joke. You really have to sell the joke. These are hilarious. How did you write these?
Where did you learn these from? Where did you learn? He even cues you for the ha when you should laugh, so there's no confusion.
Yeah, that's right. It's the punchlines are unpredictable, but the hilarity is not.
Oh, that's terrific.
I love it. And by the way, I was told, my parents were told all throughout elementary school by different teachers that, Dave's sense of humor is inappropriate. You've really got to rein this in. And they were right. It was inappropriate, but I didn't rein it in, and it made it. And it's still terribly inappropriate now, but it gives you a social, it gives you a context that you're bringing to the table that enables you, like you said, to be able to relate to other kids, for other kids to see you shine instead of, just being the quiet kid in the back.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's trying to kind of figure out where he belongs as he tries to develop those social relationships with other people. And the jokes are a great way because I kind of saw firsthand a week or so ago, the poking at someone and hiding, like playing a game, which they didn't know they were playing. But being able to actually just coach him and talk to him about, just, you can poke him, but actually say who you are and then tell the joke, as opposed to the poke and hide,
Sure. Absolutely.
And the speech language pathologist in me can point out how much it has to do with initiating communication with people, reciprocity, turn taking, sharing positive emotion. And Gardner has such good timing. I mean, his timing is excellent. He puts that pause in there so that you're just waiting for the answer. and also just projecting his voice. And
Yeah.
I'm sure doesn't seem to be a problem for Gardner being heard.
No, so he's actually the oldest of four. There's a lot of noise in my house usually, the youngest being 2. So 2, 3, 5, and 6. And
boy.
there's a lot going on over here. So there's no choice. You have to get loud to be heard.
And when it's time to go, and when it's time to go, and all 4 Rivenbark kids don't go. Mommy says Rivenbark's 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's it.
Then everybody gets in line. This is about the time of year when you and Dad are starting to think like, come on, school year. Like we have nothing but positive associations with the beginning of school.
I'm like, please send them back in person. No more virtual school. Yes, the 2 little ones are at daycare, but I've had the 2 big ones home, and they've been a lot of fun. We're actually vacation next week, and yes, after that, I think we've got a week, and then it's back to school. We'll be ready to.
Actually, that's a great strategy. A nice regulating time prior to going back to school. A lot of time to get a lot of the energy out and move back into the school routine. Fabulous.
Exactly. And he's not shy. None of my kids are shy, which is, my daughter will tell you she's shy. She's the 5-year-old, but she's not.
No daughter is ever shy. You know, I will, one thing I think would be fun if he does want to start really like writing his own material is keeping, my son kept a joke journal for a while where even if it was a joke that he read in a joke book, if the process of writing it down acquaints your brain with the cadence of a joke setup, punchline, tension. So even keeping a joke journal can be a fun thing to do.
Gardner, what do you think about that? You want to keep a joke journal? Yeah, that is right up his alley. So jokes are really important to him. He's taught himself multiplication this summer and division. So he just brings around his multiplication table with him everywhere and quizzes everybody he sees. So that's his new social lubricant, if you will.
It's wonderful. He's naturally using his strengths and his motivations to connect, and he's proud. And that's so important.
Exactly. So do you know any multiplication? Because I have a table and I can quiz you now.
I'll pass that on to engineer Dave here.
Yeah, I know. Some of our friends, they were like, "It's been a little while. Can you give me some cheats?" Yeah. Can I look at your paper?
The calculator.
You know, I want to mention, Danielle, that you're getting and Gardner's getting expert advice from a stand-up comedian. Dave knows the routine.
There you go.
No pun intended.
Yes.
Mr. Dave likes to do comedy also. He likes to tell jokes. Do you have any questions for him?
What kind of?
Well, so before we jumped on, I told him, Dave, I said, Dave has autism, and Gardner said, does that mean he's really good at something? What is he good at? I really need to know. And it's good to know you're also good at jokes.
Yes.
I'm only good at one thing, and that is telling a joke when it's needed most.
He did. I think Gardner maybe doesn't quite understand autism in general, but he does understand that he is good at certain things that other kids are not good at. And so I think that's what he has picked up of like, oh, maybe they're also really good at something because I'm really good at these couple of things.
Autism more often than not is a cape, and every superhero has their own superpowers, but autism is the cape. And I think I do want to. I want to be put to the test here, and then we can give you your day back. But I want 3 chances at 3 different multiplication problems.
Oh, good one, Gardner. Mr. Dave would like you to give him some multiplication equations.
Multiplication equation.
Yeah. Can you test him?
Sure.
He needs 3.
Okay. Okay. I'll give you. I'll give you 3 equations. And then I'll let you go. Okay.
Okay.
Come closer.
Okay.
First one.
5 times 5?
25.
Thumbs up.
Yes, I nailed it. All right.
Next one. 13 minus 3.
I'm going to go with 10. Is the answer 10?
Thumbs up.
Nailed
Wait,
it.
last one.
Oh, okay. 3 times 7.
21. Mm.
Yay.
Yeah, math is awesome, man. Math and jokes. You're speaking my language.
I think we have a math teacher as well as a comedian here.
That's right.
Thank
Terrific,
you,
Gardner.
Gardner. Good job. Thank you for quizzing me.
Quarter. Oh, he gives you a quarter, an imaginary quarter. That's your reward.
I'm taking it and I'm going to invest it and let that baby grow.
That's it.
Terrific.
Gardner, you say thank you for having us on their podcast.
Thank you for having a test on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Yes.
And so, Danielle, this is the time when this is what it all comes down to. This is a friendly competition between Barry and me. It's the only reason we do the podcast, frankly, is to see whose book is better. So you will be the ultimate arbiter in whose book means more to society, Barry's or mine, in a little segment.
It's a pretty heady calling there.
Pressure.
So, would you prefer a signed copy of the Journal of Best Practices, which I don't have a copy to show you, but it's yellow and beautiful and it's mine? Or would you prefer an autographed, personalized copy from the man himself, Dr. Barry Prezant, who does have a copy of his that he's displaying on the screen right now? This is a tough call, Danielle. Which way are you going to go? You have to hurt someone's feelings. Whose will it be?
The worst part. I have read Dr. Barry's book. So, Dave, I'm going to ask for a copy of your book. I would love to, but I've not read it yet. So
You will be so disappointed. You made the wrong call, but thank you. That's great.
I can't wait to be disappointed.
For those of you who can't see, because we are on Zoom, but you can't see, Dave just did a happy dance.
That's right. I did something in my knee too. I think I blew up my ACL, but I will take the victory. That's great. I think we're now 3-27 or something like that. So I am catching up. Well, this was great. Thank you so much, Danielle. And your family is so much fun and Gardner's hilarious.
Thank you. Gardner, can you tell him thank you?
Thank you.
And Gardner and Danielle, good luck as you start the new school year.
More transitions. We're going to be going to visit school and doing all of the social stories and talking about all the things. It's not only good for Gardner, but it's good for all the kids. So
yes, and you just checked off a bunch of boxes that we discussed previously. So this is
good. Social stories are life around here.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you
guys so much. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks.
All right. Well, that's how you do it, is you tell jokes, you get good at math, and the world is your oyster.
That's right. Yeah. It's wonderful, seeing a youngster who is proud, who loves to kind of show his stuff, and yeah, that was terrific.
I want people to understand too, like we didn't plan that. She just spontaneously mentioned that she's going to be doing all the things you just said would set somebody up for success. So good for them. And
yes,
it sounds like they've got their game plan together. It's never too late to pull one together, but especially now, school could be starting anywhere from the third week of August to after Labor Day. Now's a good time to start thinking ahead, like a couple weeks. Where do we want to be in a couple weeks? We don't want to be waking them up one day and saying, get on the bus. Like, that's probably not the ideal. So what if you could encapsulate what you just did in about 90 minutes in, say, 3 minutes, what are the main points that you would leave us with?
I think the main point is we want to make things predictable. We want to reduce uncertainty, something I've said many times before on this podcast.
I can vouch. Yeah, that's key, is the uncertainty piece.
Yeah, because, if you don't know what the path is in front of you, it's hard to kind of step confidently onto that path and step willingly onto that path. So that's very, very important. And making school as much as possible a positive experience, especially at the beginning of the school year. We know things may get a little bit more stressful as we get more, depending upon the age of the student, into academics. But let's make school a place where our kids, through their behavior, through their words, say, I want to go there. Okay, I enjoy that. Very important. By using so many of the supports that we discussed. Very important.
Absolutely. And it's, again, the stuff you're describing isn't like go knock yourself out. It's you can make it as simple or as engineered as you want it to be.
That's right. But one thing I would say, though, is sometimes, at least in my experience, putting that little extra effort in up front prevents you from having to paddle upstream a month or two into the school year. If those supports are not there and a student's having some difficulty, then it's like, oh my goodness, we have to relook at what's going on here. So that's important. And I think the last point is that we're all in it together, that the more there's coordination amongst the higher levels of the school administration, the direct service people, the teachers, the therapists working with a particular child or a group of children, caregivers, family members, the more it makes sense to any person in general, but especially the more we're helping to connect the dots for some kids and some people on the spectrum who may not connect those dots naturally.
Right. Nobody should feel like they have to solve this problem on their own, whether they're the parent caregiver, whether they're the teacher, whether they're the student, whether they're the administrator. Build the team. And we heard it from Danielle just now, too, that the problems, the challenges that we solve for our one child actually benefits all of our children,
yes,
regardless of their neurological composition. So,
yes.
Well, this is amazing conversation. And Barry, thank you. I think
Sure.
I really hope people will use the website uniquelyhuman.com and use the email addresses and contact forms on there to send strategies that the people have developed of their own that work. Share experiences where, oh, gee, I wish we would have done this in those first couple of weeks of August to really prepare our kids. And you can do that on social media as well. Want to thank Matt Savage, who provides all of our music. And while you're at uniquelyhuman.com, you can go there, listen to every episode. You can join our ever-growing community of listeners, and you can tell us what you're enthusiastic about. My computer is enthusiastic about this McAfee pop-up window that just jumped right in front of the little blurb I'm supposed to read. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to us. You know, that's a small gesture, but makes a big difference in helping us build a meaningful community of listeners and contributors, just like little small gestures can make a huge difference transitioning into a successful school year. So
yes,
big takeaway for me is teachers, parents, kiddos, be patient. Let that transition take the amount of time it needs to take. Don't rush things. At the same time, keep the bar high, challenge the kids, and provide the supports that help them get there.
Right. And we wish you all an easy transition.
Absolutely. How about that for a transition? All right. Cool. Thanks, Barry. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
Great. Thanks.